everybody, and welcome back to another Baby Claire video tutorial. This one is for the Baby Claire Beanie in the size 12 to 24 months. The gauge for this size Baby Claire Beanie is 14 stitches by 14 rows, all single crochet. Should give you a 4 by 4 inch square. And it should fit heads with a 17 to 18 inch circumference. To make this beanie, you will need 2 to 3 ounces of worsted weight yarn. This is Hobby Lobby's I Love This yarn in a colorway that has sadly been discontinued, a pair of scissors, a tapestry needle, and an I or 5.5 millimeter crochet hook. This is Clover & More brand, which is my favorite brand of crochet hook to use. I highly recommend it. Let's jump right into this pattern. We're going to start by making a slip knot. And then we are going to chain 9. We're going to single crochet back down our starting chain for a total of 8 stitches, starting in the second chain from our hook. Chain 1 and turn our work. We are starting with the brim portion of our beanie, and then after we finish the brim, we will move on to the body. For row 2 of our brim, we're going to single crochet 8, but this time we're only going in the back loop only of the stitch. Instead of going under both loops like we normally will, we're just going to insert our hook under the back loop and place our single crochet there, all the way down for 8 single crochets. Chain 1 and turn your work. We're going to want to be careful not to make your chain 1s too tight. If you do, your brim will not stretch properly and it won't fit the suggested head sizes. We're going to just single crochet 8 stitches in the back loop only, chain 1 and turn until we get a total of 42 rows in our brim. Okay, that was 42 rows in our brim. Now let's go ahead and measure it for our gauge. So it says we're looking at about 13 1/4 unstretched, but if we went to stretch it, we stretch all the way over there to 19.5 inches. So that is perfect for a 17 to an 18 inch head circumference. Now we are going to close our brim and get ready for the body of our beanie. We're going to turn our work after our chain 1 right here that we did at the end of row 42. Then fold our brim in half and line up the first row of stitches with the last row of stitches. And we're going to line them up so they are partnered with their mate here and slip stitch them together. To do this, we're going to insert our hook into the first stitch of the first row, insert our hook into the first stitch of the last row. Grab our yarn and pull through all loops on our hook. Now again, second stitch, pull through all, that's 2. I'm going to do that in all of the stitches for a total of 8 slip stitches. Last one. And then we can chain 1. Now we just made that seam there, and we're going to flip it to the inside of our beanie so it can't be seen, and the outside has a very nice join. Now we are going to start the body of our beanie, and to do this we are going to single crochet all the way around for a total of 47 stitches. Since we just had 42 rows for the brim, we're going to have to increase 5 times, and I like to just space those 5 increases out along the row. As long as they're not all right up next to each other, you'll be fine. Another thing is you will have to make your own spots for your hook to go, since this is the raw edge of our stitches, but I'm going to do a few of them here with you on camera just to show you. And again, we're going to have 47 single crochets around for the row. I'm going to go for an increase right here. That's just 2 single crochet stitches in the same spot, and then keep going all the way around for a total of 47 single crochets. Okay, coming up on my 47th single crochet. Now normally I would just join into the top of the first single crochet and chain 1, but for this specific instance I feel like this yarn color is not showing up well on video here. So I'm going to go ahead and just switch colors. Everything else will be done exactly the same, except for my body of my beanie will be a different color than my brim. I will be switching to Hobby Lobby's I Love This Yarn in Dark Denim. That way it will show up better on camera for you guys. This white background here is just blending in with my white video background. So to change colors, a little extra tip for you guys. You just grab your next color and finish out your join, and then chain 1 and pretend this is the color you've had the whole time. I'm going to go ahead and snip off my brim color and get started on our body. For rows 2 through 7 of our body, we are going to have 24 puff stitches in each row. Your first one is going to go right here in this same spot where your chain 1 just came out of. So to do that, we're going to yarn over, insert our hook into our stitch, grab our yarn, pull up a loop, do that 3 more times. That's 2, that's 3, last one. Then you're going to yarn over, pull through all the loops on your hook to finish your puff stitch, chain 1 to secure. Next we're going to skip this stitch right here and go into this stitch for another puff stitch. Yarn over, pull through all the loops on our hook, and then chain 1 to secure it. We're going to keep doing that all the way around where we puff stitch and then we skip a stitch, puff stitch, skip a stitch, till we have a total of 24 puff stitches in the row. And then we will do the same thing for rows 3 through 7, but our first puff stitch will start in a different spot each time, so I'm going to start each row with you guys here on camera. I will be back after I finish my 24 puff stitches. Okay, coming up on my last puff stitch in the row, which is puff stitch number 24. Chain 1, and now we're going to join into the top of our first puff stitch and chain up 1. For row 3, we're going to do 23 puff stitches again, but this time instead of starting in a space right up next to our chain, we're going to reach all the way over here and put our first puff stitch in this first chain 1 gap from row 2. And then in each row we will alternate back and forth between starting next to our chain and then first chain gap, next to our chain, first chain gap, and that will keep our seam going up nice and straight. So I am just going to continue to put puff stitches in each chain 1 gap from the previous row all the way around for a total of 23 puff stitches in the row. And our last puff stitch is going to go in this space right up next to our chain. Then we can join into the top of our chain 1 and chain 1. For row 4, we're going to do the same thing, but put our first puff stitch in this space right here, right up next to our chain. And then we're going to put a puff stitch in each chain 1 gap all the way around for a total of, again, 23 puff stitches in the row. Finishing up row 4, and then I'm just going to join into the top of our first puff stitch and chain 1. For row 5, we're going to put our first puff stitch all the way over here in the first chain 1 gap from row 4. We're going to continue to put puff stitches in every chain 1 gap from row 4 all the way around for a total of 23 puff stitches in the row. Finishing up row 5 by putting my last puff stitch in this chain 1 gap. That's going to make me right up close to my chain up 1. Join into the top of our chain and chain 1. For row 6, we are going to do the same thing, putting our first puff stitch right here in this space, right up next to our chain 1. And then putting a puff stitch in each chain 1 gap space all the way around for a total of 23 single crochets in the row. Finishing up row 6 with my 23rd puff stitch. Join into the top of our first puff stitch and chain 1. Now for row 7, we're going to do 23 puff stitches again, putting the first one all the way over here in our first chain 1 gap. Continue putting puff stitches in every chain 1 gap all the way around for a total of 23 puff stitches in the row. And when we get back, we are going to start doing our decreases, and this guy is almost finished. Coming to the end of row 7 with my 23rd puff stitch, I'm going to join into the top of our first stitch and chain 1. And now we can start our decrease rows. I really like how this blue is working up. Okay, for row 8, we are going to start by putting a puff stitch decrease over these first 2 chain 1 gaps from row 7, and I'm going to show you how to do that. To puff stitch decrease, we're going to yarn over, insert our hook into the chain 1 gap, the one that's closest to our chain right here. Grab our yarn, pull up a loop, do that 2 more times for a total of 3 this time. 3, and then we're going to yarn over and go into our next chain 1 gap for 3 times. That's 1, 2, 3, and then we're going to yarn over and pull through all of the loops on our hook and then chain 1 to secure it. That is a puff stitch decrease. Then we're going to puff stitch in the next 3 chain 1 gaps, and that will be our repeat for the row. It will go puff stitch decrease, then 3 puff stitches, puff stitch decrease, then 3 puff stitches, all the way around for a total of 19 stitches in the row. Now it's time for another decrease. There we go. And then 3 more puff stitches. Repeat that all the way around, and I will come back in a second and show you how to end the row. Okay, coming up on the end of my row, I just did a decrease and now I have 3 more puff stitches according to our repeat. But if you look at our row, we are out of chain 1 gaps, so I'm just going to end it there with just 2 puff stitches, leave off the last one. That'll give us a total of 19 stitches in the row. I'm going to join into the top of our first stitch, which was a puff stitch decrease, and chain 1. For row 9, we're going to start with a puff stitch all the way over here in the first chain 1 gap, way over there. And then we are going to decrease over the next 2 chain 1 gaps. 3, 1, 2, 3, pull through all and chain 1. Now we start our repeat. We're going to go decrease, puff stitch, decrease, puff stitch, puff stitch. We're going to do that all the way around for a total of 15 stitches in the row. But again, the end is going to be a little funky, so I will be back to show you how we are going to end this guy after I just keep repeating decrease, puff stitch, decrease, puff stitch, puff stitch. Be right back. Okay, I just finished my last decrease, puff stitch, and I have 2 chain 1 gaps left in the row, and logic would tell me to put another puff stitch decrease there because that is what comes after this one. But if I decrease right here, that's going to make this look weird and puckery. So we're just going to put 2 more puffs, 1 in each chain 1 gap, for a total of 15 puffs in the row. No big deal. And then we're going to join into the top of our first stitch over here and chain 1. For row 10, we're going to start with a puff stitch decrease over the first 2 chain 1 gaps, the first one being right up next to our chain. So we're going to put a decrease right here. And then we're going to put a puff stitch over here in the next chain 1 gap. Then a decrease, and we're going to do that all the way around. Decrease, puff stitch, for a total of 10 stitches in the row. But it's such a small row, I might as well do it with you guys here on camera. If you like this style of beanie, I do have a version in almost every size you could think of on my blog for free, and the original adult size, which was a messy bun beanie version, is available on my blog for free and also on my YouTube if you prefer video tutorials. Okay, this is our last stitch, and we got to do our repeat fully this time, ending on a puff stitch for a total of 10 stitches in the row. Join to the top of our first stitch and chain 1. For row 11, we're just going to decrease in every 2 stitches all the way around for a total of 5 stitches in the row. Our first decrease is going to go on these 2 guys right here, and we are going to skip all the way over into this guy for our first decrease. Okay, and 4 more to go, giving us a total of 5 stitches in the row. Okay, we can join into the top of our first puff stitch decrease and chain 1. Now we're just going to single crochet 1 time in each stitch around. I do this just to give the closed hole a more finished look. If you just close it from this stage right here, it looks a little bit like holey. So single crochet 1 time in each stitch around. I like to put my single crochets into the actual stitch of our chain 1 gaps and not just under it completely. I just go into the stitch like I would a normal single crochet and place my single crochet there. It's probably personal preference though, it would probably look fine either way. Okay, after we get our 10 single crochets, we're going to join to the top of our first single crochet, and this is where we can cut our yarn, making sure to leave a tail long enough for closing up our hole there at the top. To close up my hole up here, I will be using a tapestry needle. This one is Clover brand. And just thread your tail onto your tapestry needle. I like to use the magic close method, and that's what I'm going to show you here. If you prefer a different closing method, you're more than welcome to do your own method. To do the magic close, you're just going to insert the tip of your needle right under the front loop of your first stitch, and then twist this guy around and go under the front loop of your second stitch. And we're basically just going to keep picking up front loops all the way around and pulling our yarn through as we go, and this will help gently close our hole nice and neat. After I get through all 10 of my single crochet stitches, I like to run my needle under all of the loops just one more time to make sure they are extra secure and my hole is extra closed. Then I'm just going to stick my needle down into the body of my beanie and pull it out from the bottom. Then I'm going to flip my beanie inside out and sew in this guy the rest of the way. I just like to make a whole bunch of passes back and forth so I know that this tail is sewn in and it will not be popping out on any of my customers or friends and family that I've gifted this to. No popping out of the tail. So I'll just keep doing this a few more passes back and forth, and then I'm going to go ahead and sew in my first tail that's down there where we made our brim. And I actually have an extra 2 tails to sew in because I had to change yarn colors. I won't do those on camera. You don't need to watch me sew in 6 million tails. After we sew in this guy, our beanie would be complete if it was all one color. And then we will take a few measurements for you guys so you can compare, get a good idea of what yours should end up being. Okay. We're going to pretend that I went ahead and sewed these 2 in. Just going to tie them so they don't fall apart. There you go, that's pretty. Flip my beanie right side facing out, and then she is all done. Look how cute. I love the two-tone. Happy accident. Okay, let's take some measurements and see where we are at. This guy is about 6.5 inches tall and 7.5 inches wide. Let's compare this one to our previous baby Claire Beanies. Here is the 6 to 12 month size, the 3 to 6, and the little bitty 0 to 3. You can see all of the beanie sizes we've done up to this point. Next is the toddler size, which is a little bit bigger than this guy, and then that will be all 5 of our baby Claire beanie sizes. They are all so cute. I love the look of the tags, but also the faux fur poms. It's adorable. Now I'm gonna go get ready to make the toddler size, and I will see you back for that video.